Welcome to The Psychology of Us. This podcast is created by R.J. Starr, a public intellectual and independent psychology educator. The material presented is educational and interpretive, examining psychological life as a domain of understanding rather than intervention. It does not provide therapy, diagnosis, or professional guidance. Each episode stands as a complete work of public psychological inquiry.
Have you ever had one of those moments where you just, completely spill your guts to someone?
Oh, yeah. Like a total emotional data dump.
Exactly. You let everything out, and you feel this massive, instantaneous wave of relief.
Right. It feels amazing for you.
But then you look at the person sitting across from you, and you realize, oh, no, I just completely ruined their day.
It's just totally drained them.
Yeah. Someone drops an emotional bomb, they walk away feeling fantastic and cleansed, and they leave you holding the bag.
It's the worst feeling to be on the receiving end of that.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that whiplash, that very specific modern relational hazard, is the exact focus of our deep dive today.
Yeah. And it's based on a really fascinating piece of source material.
Right. We are looking at an essay by R.J. Starr from their psychological architecture framework. The piece is called Why Emotional Honesty is Not Emotional Maturity.
Which is quite the title.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore a pretty controversial premise. We're asking why our cultural obsession with, just being honest about your feelings might actually be destroying our relationships.
Yeah, it's about how we need to level up from simply naming our emotions to actually learning how to carry them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we've reached this really strange cultural inflection point, haven't we?
We really have. We treat the mere expression of a feeling as the absolute finish line of human development.
Right.
Starr's essay basically argues that we are walking around as adults using the emotional tools of toddlers.
Wow, toddlers.
Yeah, because we've conflated disclosure with actual psychological depth. We think blurting things out makes us mature.
Which, that's a really tough pill to swallow, especially if you spent the last decade working incredibly hard in therapy to finally articulate your internal state.
Oh, absolutely. And Starr is very careful to validate that reality right up front.
Yeah, achieving emotional honesty is a massive developmental milestone. If you grew up in a household where your emotions were constantly dismissed or you were told you were, too sensitive all the time,
then developing the vocabulary to pinpoint your internal state is huge. Just being able to say, I feel unseen, or I am angry, is a genuine victory.
A total victory.
Yeah.
But the critique here is that modern culture just stops right there.
Exactly. We've collectively decided that if a feeling is named, it is inherently valid in its expression.
Right, it deserves immediate airtime.
Yeah, and if it's an intense feeling, we act like it's urgent. We've made honesty the finish line.
So thinking about this functionally, I came up with an analogy. It feels a lot like baking.
Okay, I love a good baking analogy. Let's hear it.
So emotional honesty is like having all the raw ingredients for a cake just dumped on your kitchen counter.
All right, you've got the flour, the sugar, the raw eggs.
Exactly. And it's a necessary start. You've accurately identified what you need. But emotional maturity is actually knowing how to bake the cake so it doesn't taste terrible to everyone else in the room.
That is spot on.
Right. Because just throwing raw flour and eggs at someone and screaming, I'm baking, isn't going to go over well.
No, it's really not. And that's exactly what Starr is getting at. Honesty is just the raw material.
Honesty answers the question, what am I feeling? But maturity answers the harder question, what do I do with this feeling?
Yeah, and treating those raw ingredients as the finished product leaves us psychologically underdeveloped. Think about children. They externalize everything.
Oh, constantly.
If a toddler feels a spike of frustration, they scream it. They have to. They literally lack the neurological structures to regulate the intensity of an emotion or to delay expressing it.
Right. They don't have a choice.
But adults are supposed to build those internal structures over time.
Supposed to, being the operative word there.
Right. But if culture continually broadcasts this message that immediately verbalizing every feeling is the highest form of authenticity, we actually stop building those regulatory structures.
We arrest our own development.
Exactly. Under the guise of being genuine, we just stay toddlers emotionally.
But wait, I hear this and my immediate thought, and I'm sure you sitting at home are thinking this too, if I don't tell my partner exactly what I'm feeling, the absolute second I feel it, aren't I just being fake?
That is the most common pushback.
Right. Aren't I bottling things up in a way that's going to make me super resentful later? We've been told for years that holding back is dishonest.
Yeah, but that assumption relies on a complete collapse of two very different concepts.
Right, sure.
Internal truth and external responsibility. We operate under this totally false premise that if something is felt internally, it has to be expressed externally to be real.
Oh, wow. So if I don't say it, it still counts.
Yes. Starr points out that authenticity is actually measured by internal coherence, not by external volume.
I love that phrase. Internal coherence, not external volume.
Right. You can know exactly what you feel internally. You can hold it with complete honesty and still choose silence or privacy or just wait for a better time to bring it up.
Because, and the essay is so sharp on this distinction, feelings are data, not directives.
Yes. They're information about your internal state, not instructions on what you must do next.
It's like just because the dashboard tells you the car's low on gas doesn't mean you just yank the steering wheel and drive into a ditch to stop.
Exactly. You just register the information and plan your next move.
So if you feel a sudden intense spike of jealousy, that's just data. It is not a directive to immediately text your partner an accusation.
But to understand why we feel such an intense compulsion to send that text anyway, Starr introduces this really brilliant mechanism called emotional offloading.
Oh, the hot coal thing.
Yes, the hot coal. So we often treat our own emotional discomfort like a burning piece of coal. You're holding this hot coal, your anxiety, your sudden jealousy, your irritation, and it physically and psychologically hurts.
This burns. Your nervous system's just screaming at you to get rid of the pain.
Exactly. So your immediate unregulated instinct is to just toss the hot coal into someone else's lap.
And we disguise tossing that coal as truth-telling or, being vulnerable.
We really do. We look at the other person and say, I just need to be honest with you right now.
But the underlying motive isn't actually clarity, is it? And it certainly isn't connection. The motive is just discharge.
It's pure discharge. My hands are burning. I don't know how to handle the heat, so now you hold it.
Wow. And looking at the underlying psychology of that offloading, you are essentially treating the other person as an external nervous system.
You're demanding that they absorb and soothe an emotional spike that they didn't even generate.
And that they might not even be equipped to handle.
Right. So emotionally mature people intercept that instinct. Instead of throwing the coal, they ask themselves a quiet, really crucial question first.
Is this mine to carry, or is this something that truly needs to be shared?
Yes. Is this mine to carry?
That fundamentally shifts the entire dynamic. It forces you to acknowledge that sometimes you just had a bad day at work.
You're just irritable.
Right. The feeling is yours to metabolize. It doesn't need to become a sudden referendum on your spouse's habit of chewing their cereal too loudly.
Yeah, because many emotions actually soften with time and internal reflection. They do pass. But when we externalize them too quickly, when we throw the coal in the heat of the moment, Starr observes that those fluid feelings tend to harden into fixed positions.
Oh, I've definitely done that. An initial passing flash of annoyance hardens into a verbalized accusation.
And now you've created a conflict that you feel obligated to defend.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Knowing you shouldn't throw the coal doesn't magically stop your hands from burning.
No, it doesn't.
If we aren't using other people to soothe the burn, the internal psychological architecture actually has to change.
And Starr calls this internal shift containment, which is a word we need to be really careful with.
Right, because Starr makes a very careful distinction between containment and suppression.
Suppression is pretending the coal isn't there or trying to convince yourself the fire isn't hot.
Which we know doesn't work.
It never works. But containment is the capacity to hold an emotion internally without it leaking out.
It's holding the heat without acting on it via like a sharp tone or passive-aggressive comment or slamming a door.
Containment is the core mechanism of emotional maturity because it creates space. It manufactures this crucial gap between the feeling and the action.
Right. And by holding that space, you prevent every single emotional fluctuation you experience from escalating into a full-blown relational event.
Exactly. You don't have to have a State of the Union address every time you get annoyed.
So visualizing this psychologically, I kept thinking it operates exactly like the shock absorbers in a car.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Think about driving down a deeply rutted dirt road. A shock absorber doesn't pretend the bump in the road isn't there.
It doesn't flatten the earth.
Exactly. It registers the bump, but it absorbs the kinetic impact of it. It takes that violent, sudden jolt and dissipates the energy within its own system so the cabin of the car stays relatively smooth.
And if you don't have internal shock absorbers, every tiny pebble sends your whole system vibrating.
A pothole might literally flip the car over. Containment absorbs the jolt of the emotion so you don't flip the whole relationship over.
I really love that analogy because what the shock absorber gives the system is time to adjust.
Time is so important here.
It's everything. In human psychology, time is what allows the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, to catch up with the amygdala, which is the emotional, reactive part.
Starr emphasizes that regulation must precede communication. Timing matters so much.
Right. If you express a feeling in the absolute heat of the moment when your nervous system is in a state of high activation, what you are transmitting is merely a raw signal.
A raw signal. But if you wait, if you let the internal shock absorber do its work and hold the heat, your brain processes that raw signal and transforms it into integrated meaning.
And the difference between transmitting a raw signal and offering integrated meaning fundamentally changes the vocabulary we use.
This was one of my favorite parts of the essay, the actual language shift.
Yeah, because honesty without regulation, that raw signal sounds like absolute certainty. It's aggressive, it's closed off.
But maturity, the integrated meaning, sounds like curiosity. It's the small, intentional breath you take before a sentence begins.
You can see the shift so clearly in how people frame their conflicts.
Definitely. The raw signal of uncontained emotional honesty dictates phrases like, I feel angry, or you hurt me, or, this is how I feel, you need to deal with it.
It leaves absolutely no room for interpretation.
None. But emotional maturity shifts the language to reflect internal observation. So I feel angry evolves into, I am noticing anger and I want to understand why.
It's such a subtle shift, but it's huge. You hurt me becomes, I need some time to sort out what this just stirred up in me.
This is how I feel. Transforms into, this is what I am making of this situation and I am open to examining it.
The words are quieter, they're less combative, but the impact on the relationship is substantially deeper.
It really is. It's the difference between declaring war and inviting someone to look at a map with you to figure out where you both got lost.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And upgrading our internal shock absorbers, shifting from certainty to curiosity, it doesn't just lower our own heart rate.
No, it fundamentally alters how we impact the people around us.
Which brings us to where Starr introduces the concept of relational awareness.
Right. Emotional honesty, by its very definition, is a self-centered exercise. It is focused entirely on the internal experience of the individual. What am I feeling right now?
But emotional maturity expands the lens to include the other person.
Yes. Mature expression demands context. It requires you to ask, who is this for? Why am I saying this right now? What is the likely impact of me sharing this information?
Is this actually meant to build a bridge with the other person, or am I just trying to relieve my own internal pressure valve?
As Starr writes, relationships are systems, not confession booths.
That distinction, a system versus a confession booth, is so critical to this whole framework.
Right, because in a confession booth, the only goal is to empty your own pockets of guilt or heavy emotion, and the listener is just a silent receptacle.
But in a relational system, what enters the dynamic shapes the tone, the safety, and the structural integrity of that entire system.
If you constantly flood the system with unregulated emotion, you force the other person into a perpetual state of defensive regulation.
And Starr uses this incredible, vivid imagery here, the wrecking ball.
Well, the wrecking ball. Unfiltered honesty can feel totally authentic and righteous to the person speaking,
but completely destabilizing to everyone else in the blast radius.
Right. Someone's unvarnished reality can be a wrecking ball they have mistaken for a gift.
We see this weaponized constantly under the banner of vulnerability.
Yes. People will drop their emotional baggage onto a friend or a partner, vent for an hour, unleash every dark, unfiltered thought they have.
And frame it as doing the hard work of being honest.
And then they skip away feeling physically lighter. They feel cleansed.
Meanwhile, you, the person on the receiving end, are left sitting there to literally sweep up the glass.
You are the one carrying the weight of their unregulated nervous system. Think about the last time someone did that to you. It's exhausting.
It is. Synthesizing this gives us a core truth about human dynamics. Power without structure destabilizes.
And emotions hold immense power.
They do. When you swing them around wildly without the structural integrity of containment, you demolish trust.
But power with containment builds trust. We have to recognize that there are moments when holding back, when showing deliberate restraint, is actually the most profoundly caring act you could perform for the system.
Which is wild, because framing restraint as an act of care goes against almost everything popular psychology tells us on the internet right now.
It really does. Prioritizing the health of the relational systems sometimes means actively delaying our own immediate gratification. which honestly sounds incredibly difficult and uncomfortable in practice.
Oh, it is deeply uncomfortable. And Starr explores exactly why acting maturely often feels so bad in the moment.
Why is it so bad?
Well, for individuals who were raised in invalidating environments where their feelings were ignored or punished, practicing maturity can initially trigger a profound fear of disappearing.
Oh, I see. Because if your expression was forbidden when you were young, then as an adult, exercising any kind of internal restraint can feel alarmingly similar to being repressed all over again.
Exactly. It feels like a betrayal of yourself. It feels like you are silencing your own truth.
There is a very real, very tangible grief in maturity, isn't there?
There really is. You have to give up certain psychological comforts.
The grief of growing up. Starr points out that you have to give up the intoxicating high of being the most wounded person in the room.
Yeah, there is an undeniable power in being the victim, in being the one whose raw, volatile emotions get to dictate the energy and the focus of the entire space.
And you have to actively trade that power in.
You're trading the immediate, powerful dopamine hit of a really sharp, emotionally honest comeback for the much slower, less glamorous, entirely invisible satisfaction of a relationship that simply remains intact.
I mean, think about your own addiction to that dopamine hit. The thrill of having the last word in an argument.
The absolute rush of drafting that perfectly devastating text message where you tell someone exactly how you feel, completely unfiltered.
Pressing send feels amazing for about 4 seconds.
Right. But Starr is challenging us to trade that 4-second high for the long-term stability of a life where we aren't constantly burning bridges and alienating the people we love.
We have to train ourselves to treat our feelings as our companions, not our commanders.
It is a difficult transition. It requires immense discipline. But Starr provides a really vital reassurance for anyone navigating this friction.
Which is?
Containment is not erasure.
I love that.
Choosing to be silent in a heated moment is not a denial of your reality. Pausing is not a betrayal of the self. By holding the heat, what you are actually building is a psychological structure called continuity.
So continuity means you aren't fragmenting into a different, highly reactive person every single time your heart rate spikes or you feel threatened.
Precisely. It is the ability to remain anchored in your core self across all different emotional weather patterns.
You don't escalate. You don't become a chameleon to your own nervous system.
The feelings are still there. They're still felt just as deeply, but they no longer demand immediate action. They don't hijack your behavior.
You stop outsourcing your emotional regulation to the people around you because you finally develop the discernment to know which feelings require dialogue to resolve.
And which ones simply require your own internal digestion.
Wow. So just summarizing the core lesson from R.J. Starr's architectural framework here. Emotional honesty merely opens the door. But emotional maturity is what decides how and when to walk through it.
Exactly. It is about knowing what your feelings are actually asking of you and responding with deliberate care rather than reflexive impulse.
Honesty is the raw material. Maturity is knowing how to build something lasting with it.
You know, building on everything Starr lays out here, I think there's a really provocative application for this that isn't explicitly in the essay, but it feels so relevant.
So let's hear it.
Consider the digital world you interact with every single day. Look at the architecture of social media.
Okay, yeah.
It is an infrastructure built entirely to reward emotional offloading.
Oh, wow. It is.
The algorithms systematically prioritize the raw signal, the immediate outrage, the unvarnished reaction, the throwing of the hot coal over any kind of integrated meaning.
Because the hot coal gets retweets.
Exactly. It literally incentivizes and monetizes a lack of containment. So if emotional maturity requires time, space, and internal restraint, how can we possibly practice emotional adulthood in digital spaces that are engineered to provoke our most immediate, unregulated honesty?
That is heavy. We're fighting a massive uphill battle against both our own biology and the technology we use every single day.
We really are.
That is a brilliant and necessary question to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into R.J. Starr's work.
It's been a great conversation.
The next time you feel that hot coal burning in your hands, the next time you're about to spill your guts and drop a wrecking ball into someone else's day, we encourage you to just take one quiet breath, ask yourself if it is yours to carry, and we will see you next time.
This has been The Psychology of Us. The work presented here is part of a public psychological archive by R.J. Starr. It is educational and interpretive, not clinical or advisory. Episodes are published as finished reflections and are intended to be encountered as complete works.